Good evening, everyone. Welcome to the session. I am Parth Pant. This year, I got a chance to work at an organization called Inkscape under Google Summer of Code. I'm a third year electronics and communications engineering student, and one of my key areas of interest is microprocessors and low-level software programming. And we also have with us Niti ma'am.
Hello everyone, I am Niti Kaur, a final year undergraduate student pursuing my computer science from IIT UNA. I'm working with MicroPython for the Google Season of Docs program, and apart from that, I'm a GHC 21 Scholar, SIS 2020 Software Edition winner, and FFP USA Scholar. I'm interested in AI and interested in web development. Now back to you, Parth.
Thank you, ma'am. First of all, thank you for joining us. This session is meant to give you a very basic overview of what open source is and how and why you should contribute to open source software. So, we hope this is helpful for you. And without any further ado, let's start. When we talk about open source, I just want to spend a little time talking about what it is. And I see that there is a lot of confusion among students as to what is the difference between free software and free and open source software. And free software is basically something that you can download from the internet and use for free. And that's it. But with free and open source software, you can actually access the source code that is behind the software. So there are limitless things that you can do with this. You can download the source code, change it, edit it, add new features, fix some bugs, and even make your own projects out of it. And that's the main difference between free software and free and open source software. Free software does not let you access its source code. And that's the power of open source. You can literally make your own products out of the work that other people have done. Now, a lot of people think of what examples of open source software are there. And let's say, for example, you're using Firefox to view this, then you're using open source software. In fact, if you're using internet, 90% of the content management systems that are there are built on open source technology. Either they are open source or they use other projects that are open source in their service. And one of the biggest examples is Android. Even though Google has added its own functionality to better integrate it with its own ecosystem, Android is mostly built on open source. So if you have an Android phone right now, I would highly recommend you to go to the settings and scroll down a little, go to the about phone section, and there is a list of all the open source licenses. And you can actually see a very large list of all the projects that Android uses. Another great example is that go to this website called alternative2.net. This is a very good website where you can find open source alternatives to proprietary software. So let's say, for example, you use Photoshop or Microsoft Word, you can go to this website and find what other open source alternatives are there. And it's a great way, in my opinion, to get to know more about open source, what open source projects are there. So now I think we have this down, like what open source is. So moving on, why should you use free and open source software? And there's a very common reason for that, and that is it's free. But there's a lot more to it. You can when you use an open source software, you can be free that you can be satisfied that no one is tracking you. It is very safe. And just to take as an example, Linux which is an open source operating system, is considered to be one of the most secure operating systems. And most of the servers and services like AWS, Google Cloud, they run on their servers, they run Linux. And the reason for that is that Linux is open source. Because the code for Linux is freely available for anyone, there are literally thousands of people who are going through each and every line of the source code trying to find some bug. And it makes it very easy to solve bugs that are there. There are literally organizations that are dedicated towards research and just to find at least one bug in Linux. And when that happens, it usually makes a very good news article. And the bug is usually fixed within a matter of days. And also, I think some of you might have heard that about 2 or 3 months ago, India made its CoWIN platform public. And that was probably the first time any country's government has made a technology that was solely developed by its public sector available for other countries to use. So you can see that how people are realizing the power of open source. And also, one of the major reasons why you should use FOSS is that it is completely community driven. People who work on open source software usually work on it because it's their passion, and it's always good that you can go to a forum or an IRC and ask questions about how things work and why they are implemented the way they are. Now, and you also get a very good chance to hack around and learn new stuff by just looking at the code and seeing how it is all arranged. And now I'll move on to why you should actually contribute. So, when you're using a free software, you need to understand that it is developed by people who are working for free. And the power of open source is that literally anyone can go and start contributing. So if you are using a software and it's open source and you want to add a new feature, you can do that. And you don't really get to do this with other closed source or proprietary software. And people say that if you're good at something, you should never do it for free. But I think that's the exact reason why you should contribute to open source, and that is to get good at software engineering and programming in general. So when you are contributing to an open source software, these projects have a very high bar for the quality of code that is actually accepted. So when you submit a pull request or a merge request, then the people who are working as a community on the project will actually review your code and they will tell you exactly what's wrong with it. And through this process of communicating and cycling back and forth and doing lots of changes, you will finally come up with a version of the code that is actually very good. And that is the way you learn the best practices. And do keep in mind that these maintainers who are maintaining this project are experienced people who have about 10 to 15 years of experience working in actual real world companies. So it is great. It is a great learning exercise. Um, Also, if you are interested, there are many open source programs that you can participate in. And what these programs are meant to do is to incentivize students to contribute to open source. And the way they do it is by giving you a stipend for working in an open source organization. So there are a few examples here like Google Summer of Code, Google Summer of Docs, Outreachy, or Girl Script Summer of Code. And if you are in second year, then I can tell you that all of these programs have great stipend. And if you ask any third year student, then you can easily understand that the stipend that these programs provide are generally much better than most of the internship opportunities you will get in third year. And also, you will be in these programs or in contributing to open source in general, you will be working with people from all around the world and you'll get to make connections with those people. So it's a good idea to contribute to open source. So I think now three things must be clear for you as to what open source is, why you should use open source software, and why you should contribute to it. Now, moving on to how to exactly contribute to open source. Over to you, Niti ma'am.
Thank you, Parth, for telling us about the open source communities. Now, I'm sure whatever Parth talked about, find your curiosity levels, and you would want now to contribute to some or the other open source programs. Now, the bigness. Where do you actually start? How do you choose a project or organization? So, the path to finding the right transition starts with knowing yourself. Ask yourself these questions. What are your professional? Is your skill set? What open source use? What are your hobbies? After you answer all these questions, I am sure you will get the answer to the bigger question. That is, which organize to choose. If we are talking about GSOC, Outreach, MLH, or any other open, the path isn't so different either. But first of all, these questions to yourself. Do you want to get out of these prestige programs? This is another question you have to ask yourself. The answer to this can be anything, ranging from skills to money. If we talk about these open source programs from the financial perspective, not the technical one, and if I'm to present you the practical thing to do and not the philosophical one, then the wiser thing to do is to choose the organization which has lesser number of contributors for the program. But talking about a person who wants to gain skills and wants to gain something in terms of technical experience, well, of course, you have to answer all these questions which we talked about while choosing the organization for open source. However, I can assure you that if you have been contributing from the start for gaining skills, you will have increased your chances of getting selected for these programs too. I will be taking the example of Gsoc, but all other open source programs have the same procedure. For selecting the organization for open source programs, you can speculate if a particular organization will be selected for the present year if they have been selected for the previous 2 or 3 years. Good chances that it will be selected and you can start contributing on it early. When the program will be open and the organization will be announced, you can look for that particular organization. Now, let's say it is not selected. Then we can go through the list of accepted organizations published on the GSOC website, which is usually published early in February, and compile a list of organizations based on the answers to the questions we discussed earlier. The projects are also tagged with these. The categories can be programming languages, platforms, and applications. You can use these tags organizations based on your skills and interests. Now, Parth will give you a walkthrough how your organizations based on tags. For over to you, Parth.
Okay, so again, I'll be just following the example of Gsoc, but the process is more or less similar for any other open source program. Now, this is the website for Gsoc, and you can see that in the organization section, they have listed all of the organizations that participated in 2021. Now, if you go to any of the organizations, let's say AFL++, they have listed what technologies they work on. So this is basically about C++, Rust, and fuzzing. Instrumentation and LLVM are something more advanced. So LLVM is low-level virtual machine, and instrumentation is mostly used for testing your program. So you can learn a lot more about these projects and actually see what other people have done. And a good thing about this website with Gsoc is that you get all the links for the chat and mailing list, and you can start actually contacting your mentors. And they also provide a list of ideas which you can then use to make your own proposals. But right now, I'll just show you a very basic example of another open source project. It's called Baby, and it's a game engine written in Rust. Rust is another programming language. Now, this full disclosure, this is not a GSOC organization. This is just something I find very interesting. So most of these organizations that are open source will tell you that they're open source on the homepage. So, and also there would be a section for community. You can go there and see there are all the links for their Discord and GitHub and Twitter and Reddit. So let's just go to GitHub. And you have all the source code for this game engine freely available to you. You can download this and you make your own games there. And the first step that most people take while contributing to an open source project is to find a bug and report it. And here you can see that a lot of people have made lot of issues. And let's take this one for example. Someone has reported exactly what he was trying to do, what he expected would happen, and what error message he got. So this is something that you all must try to do when you're first trying to contribute. Also, you can make pull requests. Now, I think I made a pull request about a couple of days ago, and I added something to the example, and then people will review this after some time, and hopefully it will get merged. But let's just hope it gets merged. But that's the basics of how you can find an organization, learn more about it. You can go to the chat and talk to them, and also read about what other people have done. So I would encourage all of you to go to Gsoc organization and try to filter organizations based on your interest. For example, if you're interested in web development, you can try JavaScript, and you will find organizations that use JavaScript. So if you're interested in cloud, you will find organizations that use cloud technologies. So, anyways, for now, if you feel confused about the terminologies that I'm using, like merge requests, issues, and pull requests, then do attend tomorrow's session, which will be based on Git and the open source workflow, where you can learn a lot more about how to go about actually writing code and submitting a pull request. But for now let's just move on to how you can interact with your mentor. So over to you, ma'am.
Okay. So now, like for each organization, you can take some time to learn about what they do. That is, you can Google about them basically. The organization's mission, its size, and range of applications all may influence your interest in working with them. Ideally, you'll find an organization enthusiastic to be a part for many years. Now we'll be going to the next topic, that is about contacting mentors. So now the question is, who are mentors? Now, mentors are basically people from the community who volunteer to work with a student, and this will be you. Mentors provide guidance such as pointation, code reviews, setting etc. etc. In addition to providing feedback and pointers, a mentor acts as an help the students contribute and integrate their projects into the project's community. Now, to answer how to contact them. We can contact our mentors through IRC channels. For example, Slack is an IRC channel. The link of whose is given in the project's GitHub page most of the time. As Parth showed us while giving a example of Gsoc, we can click on the chat button so that we can be redirected to their page. If not, try to get to know them through GitHub and ask about them. You will get in touch with them in no time. Now, specifically for the open source software programs, we have what is called the community bonding period. What is the community bonding period? You all will be wondering. The community bonding period is when you work out further details of your project plan, schedule regular upcoming meetings with your mentor, get your development environment set up, and start to engage with the project's open source community. Let me assure you all, it's actually wonderful to be a part of these open source programs and these communities. This is the time to work with your mentor on setting expectations for your interactions and how it will be measured during the program. Hopefully, by this time, you have already participated in many discussions with your mentor, clarifying the project and the expectations during the application period. But this community bonding period is the time which will actually be the time to finalize your plans. That was basically it for today. Thank you, everyone. Now, it would question if you can ask us questions in the Okay, how early should we get involved with organization if you're targeting GSOC 2022? See, like we said, like the earlier, like you have to actually try to engage with the organizations for the aim of contributing to open source and gaining skills from it. Like if you want to do it for the skills, but then start it from now and now only. And if you're in the ideal time to target an organization is December, January. This is basically the time when most of the people start contributing, because it takes some time usually to understand their code base, to actually bond with the people over there. And after that, you can and it well versed with what their project is all about, and then you can it's around March then actually that the application. It started late this year, but this is basically the time for it. So we can go to the next question. What is the
Okay.
difference? So yes, Path can take it.
Okay, so Google Summer of Code and Google Summer of Documentation, these are the full form. So GSOC is basically you send a proposal to an organization about a feature that you want to implement, and that is basically it. You in the program you write code, but in Google's season of docs you write documentation, and documentation is support documents that developers can read about how to use a certain API or a project's programs. So that's the basic difference. In Google Summer of Code, you're adding a new feature, working with programmers, and in Google Summer Season of Docs, you're writing support documentation that other people can read. So that's the basic difference.
Also, like GSOC is more about like coding yourself, and GSOC is more about like understanding the code and writing the documentation. Like if I'm talking about the Keras or the Android documentation, then I'm sure you might have used it. So what do developers do is that they read the documentation, they read the code, understand it, and then they make the documentation in the GSOC program, Google Season of Docs program. And in GSOC, we basically code and do make the features and find bugs and all of this. So next question. So I guess everyone had some questions. We'll wait for some time if any more questions. And start with GSOD. So how you can start with GSOD? I will tell you my experience. What I did was one of my college mates only guided me with how to approach GSOD. So what I did was particularly talking about my organization, MicroPython, had a basic knowledge, quite some knowledge about microcontrollers and stuff. So thought that it would be a good organization. What I did was that I went through their proposal, what all they wanted to do. Then I went through their GitHub page and opened the docs folder. So after that, I installed some softwares like RST and Sphinx, and then I built these docs. Now, what I did in my particular case was like they had 5-6 targets, and I picked one of their targets. And what I did was I made the documentation for that feature, and that was how I approached the Google Season of program. So they were quite impressed with like I made the feature for that particular thing, and I made it like in a very proper way, like how your documentation is hosted for any other open source program, open source software. And after that, we have to make a proposal, just like for Gsoc, we make a proposal. Similarly, for Gsoc, we also make a proposal, and then I actually interacted with my mentors, and they were quite impressed. And this is how it went for me. Uh, okay,
So
so
this, how many organizations should I contribute to? If you are just trying to contribute to open source in general, then there is no limit. However, I would recommend that you choose an organization that you feel genuinely interested in, or if you are learning a new technology, like let's say you are a web developer, then try to contribute to an organization that deals with web development. And similarly for other fields also. In GSOC, they limit you to send your proposals to only 3 organizations. So if you start now, then you can have like 2 organizations maybe, and then try to get more accustomed to their code base. I hope that answers it.
okay, so the next question is there any specific language? No, there isn't any specific language which is required for G. There are many organizations. Some can be doing their work in C++. Some will be doing their work. So all of them will be working on different tech stacks. So you have to search for the organization whose tech stack you are comfortable with, and you can start with that particular organization. Now, what is specifically required for GSOD is a basic understanding of RST and swings, and that is like no big issue in 1 day, 1 or 2 days. That's it. Next question.
Okay, so the amount of prior knowledge that you need, it really depends, but most of the times it's not being at a level that is considered professional. So if you are, let's say for example, you know a little bit of C, then you can actually contribute to a project that uses C++, because both of the languages are very similar, but the difference is that C++ has inheritance in classes. And you don't need to know everything about C++, because C++ is a very huge language, and each and every project only uses a subset of its features. So if you know, and this is just an example for C, and same goes for all other languages. So I would recommend that if you are not sure about how much you know, then please at least just go through the code base, and you will understand, and just try to see what things you don't understand, and then search about it. But in general, if you know how to use Google, then you won't have a problem.
Okay, so if anyone wants to ask some more questions, they can ask now. Okay, how many proposals can you submit? So, answering this question, like you can submit any number of proposals before the application deadline. Like, the ideal choice to submit is like you can actually submit twice before your final submission, because what you do is once you submit a proposals, then mentors will give you feedback like what all you can improve, and then you can make the changes and then submit them again. So uh, the like you can submit any number of times. Usually prefer 2 times, because uh, before the final because it will help you to get a feedback. Now next question, we can take the next question.
Okay, so if you have a little bit of knowledge of C++ and web development, yes, you can. You definitely can. In fact, you don't need to have any knowledge. You can look at open source as a learning opportunity. If you think that you can learn more of C++, then contributing and reading other people's code is a very nice exercise to learn more about C++ or any other programming language. And for all those people who are wondering how to exactly write a proposal, we will have a session for that also. So do stay tuned for that.
Okay, so the next question is how to such massive code bases of open source project. Basic thing is like as we said earlier, the earlier actually gain actually do some open source kind of thing for gaining knowledge, the better it is because the it is actually the understanding of the code base which takes a very huge amount of time. So what you can do is you can actually start good first issue is something which is to help you people to get an idea how you will proceed. You feel at ease with the code. It will be like Parth gave us a walkthrough. There were many. You can find many good first issues. You can start with that. Help you to get an understanding of how you can start, and then you can start building on that only. So next question.
Okay, so a minimum number of contributions really depends on the organization. So I can talk about Inkscape. They had a requirement of at least 3 pull requests, but some organizations have about 5, and some don't have a requirement. So before you send a proposal, you should read their page about contributing. So you'll find everything there.
Okay, so the next question is it necessary to know all the languages and tech stack of the project we are willing to contribute to? No, it is not at all necessary that you have to know everything about the project you are willing to contribute to. In fact, you can know nothing and actually start contributing to a project. Like if you are a beginner with web development or C++, you have some basic idea, that's it. You can start with the good first issues and then work through the program, work through their code base, and mentors will help you out. Like they are very down to earth people and they don't expect like you will be very knowledgeable about the subject. They are actually willing to help you to guide through each and every small thing, reasonable small thing that you want a help with. So like any question. Okay, so there aren't any more questions, then I can wrap up with the session. So, like before wrapping up, I would like to say this to you all that please fill the feedback form, and if you will fill the feedback form, then only you will be eligible for the prizes and mentorship. So we will be having all the other sessions like a tutorial for GitHub, the light, a mentor talk also, and a special proposal. So be sure to join those talks too and do fill up the feedback form. So I guess we should wrap up. Thank you everyone for joining, and
Also, one thing that I would like to add, you can see these resources on this I've presented, and these are some great resources you can use to actually learn more about open source and the Git workflow. And please install Git and do attend tomorrow's session if you don't know how to use Git and to better understand the open source workflow. It will definitely help you. It is probably the most important thing that you need to know before trying to contribute to any open source software. So
That's it then. Thank you everyone for joining. Hope you will all join us tomorrow in our tutorial for Git. Thank you.